But what the fuck was it like being married to a baby, bro? Like, come on. There's people laughing here. No. Fuck you, alright?
They don't seem to stop breastfeeding their children.
Oh,
Sons.
fuck. Oh, you went dark.
Let go of that breast milk, will you?
It's... fam, like, there's no breast milk, I swear. Hello, so we're here with Kalbir Bains. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
Yeah, did you find the offices and everything fine? Samosa Chats HQ?
Yes, I did.
Excellent, cool. So we're here, obviously you're the author of...
Not Our Daughter, The True Story of a Daughter-in-Law.
Excellent. And that it does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Documents your story as a daughter first and then a daughter-in-law second.
Yes.
So if we recap very briefly, what is the book actually about?
It's a journey about a girl who goes through marriage, and then as she's going through the journey of marriage, of meeting potential bachelors, dives into a bit of a history of her mum's journey, her nan's journey, and then going through the whole process of trials and tribulation of an arranged marriage through to becoming a divorcee.
Right. That was very succinct. I read the book. I could not put it down. I read it in about 2.5 days.
Right. Okay.
It is fucking unbelievable. Like, I can't believe, like, the story and everything, and then obviously the outcome as well. You're here, you're good,
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. But I couldn't believe it. And I think it is a cultural taboo as well.
There's a lot of things that I've covered in there which are cultural taboo.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up, thinking it's religious as well, and kind of get it mixed up. For me, it's cultural, and it's something I felt like generation of women before me need to talk about. Nobody was breaking that silence to actually raise their voice and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And one of the first highlighted notes I made in the book, and I sent it over to you as well, was that this is not a religious issue.
No.
It's a cultural issue.
Yeah.
And obviously it comes out through the book. You're a fairly religious person?
I wouldn't say I'm religious, I'm spiritual, but had obviously growing up with my nanny in the household and my mom, and nanny being an Orthodox Amrit girl, so she's very much about the Guru and the Kahani every night, page of Sukhmani Sahib every night before bed.
Yeah.
I've grown up with all of that, but I've taken elements that I find beautiful in my life today.
Gotcha. Excellent. So to recap just a little bit further, so you went through a marriage which definitely was not a healthy marriage.
No.
You were effectively living, you married into the Gestapo basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were living with a bunch of SS, KGB level militant people.
I didn't know I was going to be living with those kind of people because it was an arranged marriage, and they sold me a product that wasn't actually, I didn't read the small print on the tin, shall we say?
Yeah.
And it was a different kind of product sold to me until I got married, and then I discovered there's a lot more to life under their roof.
Yeah.
Under the Pariwal's roof, shall we say, in the book.
Pariwal's book. I love that as well. The ingenuity of just coming up with fake Punjabi names. Like, I don't know how you just wasn't like, hey, I'm going to snitch on all of the family, fuck it.
I had a friend who was a journalist who checked the book for me. I've done everything correct in the manner where she checked the whole process and said, look, there's a process where they could sue you if you're sharing your own journey. So I had to change everyone's name, identity and everything. So my name in the book is Harleen, and I have put at the beginning of the book that it's inspired by true events, which it is, and it's my own journey.
Yeah.
My personal
How
journey.
long did it take you to because we discussed this over the phone initially, didn't we? How long did it take you to actually come out and be like, okay, this is my story? It's not Harleen's story, it's my story.
I was even towing it up until the day of the book launch. I wasn't sure if I wanted to say it's my journey because I didn't know how people are going to take it until, I don't know, the last minute at being at the book launch at Ernst & Young. I just decided, do you know what? I'm just going to say it's me. And I felt comfortable because looking at the room full of people, I thought, I'm just going to be me. I'm in a safe space. And that made a massive difference for me. That, it's a confined space where people have been invited to this. They know what they've come to here to talk about or listen. And I just opened up. And when I did do that, it made me feel so comfortable in the sense where there was other people in the room that were opening up with their stories and journeys.
Yeah.
So it was just once I opened up, you saw like almost like a web of spiders of people just standing up in the room and sharing different parts of their journey, from their parents, from their grandparents, to their own journey, different genders as well. So there was girls and guys sharing their story in the room, which made me feel really comfortable.
Guys had similar stories.
Yeah, I think there was guys that actually had noticed things, you know, what their mothers had gone through, what their grandmas had gone through, what they've seen in living in a joint family unit at home.
Yeah.
That makes a difference.
Gotcha. How much? So obviously your story, and we obviously buy the book as well. We're not going to take you over the actual the full story, but how much of your story is actually, do you think, is influenced by culture?
How much of it is influenced by culture?
Because obviously issues that you raise, like domestic violence and emotional abuse, things like that, like they go throughout cultures. They permeate all societies. But would you say there is something in our own culture and the South Asian community as a wider community that needs to be addressed?
See, I think overall, where like if you look at just domestic, I call it domestic violence, not abuse. They've toned it down by calling it abuse.
Right.
Now, domestic violence doesn't discriminate against gender, against your background, against your, you know, how educated you are or anything. It's domestic violence at the end of it, or abuse. And, you know, if you're going to be affected by that, you're going to be affected by that. And also, if you look at, like, I mean, fair enough, within the culture, there's not many cultures that do arranged marriages now.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of touched on to the royal family and looking at that and saying, look, it used to go on in the Elizabeth period time. So all it is, it's been washed out in the English, you know, community, whereas though it happened during Elizabeth period time to strengthen bloodlines, cultures, communities. And again, the same thing with the Punjabi community. It's wanting to know that, you know, you're finding a suitable match for your kids, which they feel is a great suit. And, you know, the families are going to be compatible, everyone's going to get on, you know, you're strengthening bloodline and things like that. Do
you think arranged marriage should be washed out in our culture?
I think it is being washed out. There's a massive shift because people are finding their own partners, people are dating out of race, you know, there's none of this. As back in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s, there was that whole thing where, you know, the pressure of you having to meet a partner that has to be the same religion and same caste. Yeah. And I think even growing up myself, I saw the caste thing was washing out. And even now with what I've been through, it's really challenged everyone in my family. And I've had those conversations where I've said that I'm coming home with whoever I'm happy with. As long as that person treats me as a human being, will go a long way. But it's taken for me to get married and divorced for the challenge that behavior within my family unit. But there's also people that have challenged it outside of marriage. And I think, you know, you're seeing that your kids' happiness comes into it more than anything else.
Yeah, I think especially the caste thing. The religion thing, I can kind of, again, I don't agree with it, but I kind of understand it. I empathize with it. But the caste thing to me has always been so fucking silly. Like, imagine they were like, okay, this one is a podcaster. Yeah. You can only marry podcasters from future. Okay, that's it. Finish. And like, I always think that's so silly. Like now, like, oh, he's a farmer. That's going to be the person. That one works with wood. You're going to marry wood making people.
Well, to be honest, I never got it when I was at uni, because when I was at university and when I lived away from home, I found where, you know, this whole thing in India, I mean, that's another thing with caste. I didn't know what caste I was, I'm going to be honest with you, until I turned, I think it was when I was about 14 at secondary school, and some guy came over and asked me what caste I was. And I came home and I went, Mom, when me and my twin sister both went, Mom, what caste are we? Because we've got asked at school. Yeah. And it was then I discovered there was a caste system. So up until then, I was quite oblivious to all that behaviour. Right. I didn't even think what caste I was or what background. All I knew was I'm Sikh. Right. That's about it. So, and then I saw it more evident when you're growing older, in the sense when you get to college and university, someone's asking you what caste you are you eligible to date? Yeah. Are you ticking the tick box to date? And when I used to get guys come and ask me that, I deliberately wouldn't give my surname away. I deliberately would tell them I'm a different caste, because I thought, you're not worthy for me to even date you or even be with you. Bro,
we had totally different upbringings. Like my parents were always like, oh, tum Sikh, huh? But also Jat.
But don't get me wrong. But I remember like growing up and that whole thing, because my mum was a single parent, the pressure where for me was a privilege to have the education, you know, that my mum trusted me to go to uni. So there was a lot of girls I met at uni whose parents, like, for them it was freedom from away from home. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to have that freedom, because mum had given us that freedom on the front door, where we were allowed to wear makeup, we were allowed to wear whatever clothes we wanted, cut our hair, do what we wanted to do, because she had to have that relationship being a single parent with us. And she said, that Punjabi saying, university, like, I'm sending you to uni with trust. Do not damage my trust, because once you've lost my trust, you've lost everything. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I had that freedom there. And also, I got that, you know, when you're at uni, where don't look at boys when you're at college, at university, but hit 25, now you're marriage material, haven't you got a boyfriend, what is going on? And you're like, are you kidding me? Now you expect me to just miraculously bring some guy up from the surface and now I'm ready. And then it was like, he has to be Sikh, he has to be Jat. And I was like, and I did challenge them with that.
Yeah, one of the I think you've hit on something quite interesting. One of the notes that I made when reading your book, and it was just a thought that came. I was on the tube and I was like thinking about like the relationships and aspects and stuff, and with your ex. And I was thinking, we as like a community or whatever, and I don't want it to sound like I'm being overly critical, because there's huge positives in our culture, right? Yeah. Massive. But I do think there is this like viewpoint that you shouldn't be dating before marriage, that you shouldn't be in relationships. I think that is actually detrimental when it comes to those, that when you're 25, 26, having serious relationships, because you never learn how to treat people in a relationship.
You don't know how it feels like to be in a relationship for a start, because you're going from, for one thing I learned in my process was I actually did date, but I never got intimate with anyone, is the one thing that I really made sure I kept a fine line on. And it was just something I felt comfortable wanted to do.
Basically, Kalbir, what you're saying is you never learn how to fuck.
I didn't get sexually active, shall we say, in the most politest way.
You were trying to keep this veneer.
I was one of those good Indian girls, like, you know, what's Kama Sutra? I don't know what that's all about. Oh, was it created by the Indians? Okay, turn the page. Oh, where's the TV control? When a sexual scene goes on TV. And back then it was very much, and I think you've got to remember, we're talking the early 21st century. I mean, I'm showing my age here now, like, and I went to uni late 90s. So, you know, back then it wasn't, the culture was slightly different. Yeah. Whereas the parents and people have become more open now and they can talk about things. Where then it wasn't, and it was that whole thing. And I think I gave my mum that respect, that she sent me away to uni with so much trust. I don't want to jeopardize that trust. That was far more important to me. So she knew I'd expressed to her I was dating someone at uni, and I told her that. And then she was like, right, okay, would you see yourself getting with him? I'm like, I'm not sure yet, and things like that. We had those conversations. Like, my sister was, you know, with her partner for 4 years, living with him. My mum knew about that. None of the community did, right? Yeah. So she was living with him for 4 years. And you've got to be, there was an element of my mum to believe that, no, they're living together, but they're not sharing a bedroom together. Yeah. You know, Indian parents like to have that. You let them have that. Yeah. But there was also pressure on me where, because she'd done that, it was like, please don't do that. Because it killed her because she's given us so much freedom that you're going to be living with a guy before marriage. I don't want that from you. I'd like you to meet the guy. And I think when you live with them, is another story altogether as well, because you learn so much about a person until you live with them. You don't know them. Yeah. Dating is one element and getting to know them, but once you're living with that person day in, day out, you learn so much about their habits as well. Yeah, and like just the overall compatibility, I guess. So I've always been like pretty anti like the traditional Punjabi like way of like, look, you date in secret, and then one day you come home and say, look, marriage, that's done. Like I've never like prescribed up to that, and like I think you lose valuable experience, man. Like what if you're going to be with somebody in like 30, 40 years? You got to know you're compatible. Yes, exactly. And that's something that I think once I went through the arranged marriage process, I learned that I didn't know the person I was marrying really. I didn't know him at all, and whereas when my sister came home, my twin, I remember. Like when she was having that conversation with my mom, and my mom said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Mom, I even know the way he wants his cup of tea in the morning." Yeah. You know, I couldn't sit there and say that because I didn't know how he wants his cup of tea or what his favorite food was until I got married and I learned it all. Yeah. Even though you know to a certain point, you don't know someone until you're actually getting to know them, really dating them, and living with them. What's that like first few weeks like? That first few weeks of where you're married, you're now married to somebody that you hardly know, right? No, it is. You hardly know, and then like you're also now living with the family. Because I'll be honest, even when we go on holiday, I say to my parents, like when we go to India and stuff and we're staying with like a family or whatever, I'm like, look, you got 3 days to keep me with somebody else and then I'm done. Yeah. Like I can't do it. I can't even staying with like friends and stuff. Like I'm like, oh man. We're going to Berlin in a few days and I'm already not looking forward to sharing a hotel room for 4 days. Okay. I think at that time I did appreciate my own space, as well as I I was very family orientated as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I love family around me. And, you know, that's one of the elements. I think the reason I wanted that was because my mum and dad were divorced and we never had my father's side of the family.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like I always missed out. And I wanted my kids, my next generation, to have both grandparents. So even if I was living in a joint family, that wasn't a problem for me. I wanted that choice. I wanted to meet a guy that wants to live with his parents.
Right.
Because I wanted to have a good relationship with his parents. Tomorrow when I have kids, I want my kids to have both grandparents. That was important to me because something I never got, I wanted my kids to have.
Right.
So that wasn't an issue. It was just, there was funny elements though. I remember coming back from our honeymoon and my ex-mother-in-law thinking it was so romantic to set our bedroom up for us. And there's candles and there was flower petals. And I'd walked into this thinking, oh my God, like, really? Are you going to do this for real? And this is like one of those Bollywood films where like I'm waiting for the Swagarat song to come on or something. And I was like, what the hell is she on? And she was like, I picked your bed sheets and, you know, I hope you like the colour. I was like, that part mortified me. Or when obviously you're living in a joint family and there was this one occasion we were making out in the shower and the father-in-law shouts from the garden and you're like, is he in the bedroom?
Oh, dear God.
Right? They were the awkward moments. But then there was benefits as well living with a family.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you want to do something or you want to, you know, like you got family gathering, you know, there's pros and cons with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to say, even though the relationship never worked out there, I've got some really good fun memories with the family as well as bad memories.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I remember the one time I was working late in the study and I thought it'd be fun because I'm quite a lively person. Before I even got married, I was a lot more lively as well. And I decided to put some heart-shaped chocolates in my father-in-law's lunchbox.
Oh,
And leave him a little love note from my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And ex-mother-in-law right now, but the mother-in-law at the time. And what happened was he'd got to work and apparently that same week was their civil ceremony wedding anniversary and he thought he'd forgot. So he then turned around and he's panicking at work. He's got her flowers. Yeah. He's got her chocolates. He's gone and picked up some perfume. He's stressing to all his work colleagues. They've all helped him out. He's got home. He's showering her with love. She's thinking he's lost the plot. And then she's like, what the hell's going on? And he's there like, well, you dropped some heart-shaped chocolates in my lunchbox with a love note, didn't you? And she's like, no.
He's like, oh, she's playing hard to get. Yeah. I see how this is going.
And then when I got home from work, because I used to work in the East Midlands at the time and lived down south, so obviously leaving the house 6 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 9 o'clock. When I got to the door, they were like, have you done something, Kalbir? And I was like, what? And everyone's looking at me and I'm like, why, what's happened? And they goes, and my ex-mother-in-law was like, he's bought me flowers and he's got me this and that. And she goes, no, I didn't write him any love note, but he got a love note in his lunchbox. I go, did he though? What did you put in the note? Played along with it. And then I was like, yeah, I did it.
Oh man, that's 2 evenings we're in. Like, what the hell? All day he's probably thinking, okay, I'm going to get some booty, okay? When I go home, like, it's going to be, I'm going to lay it down, right? And then the mother-in-law was thinking, oh, okay, cool, like, we got this
I'm going
going.
to have an easy night tonight.
Yeah, I know. She's like, oh, this is going to be great. Yeah, she got her best suit out, everything.
She got spoiled though. She got all three.
She's right. She's loving life.
So there's like fun parts as well as the interfering parts as well.
Hey
you
man,
do get that.
No disrespect, but if I went through something that you went through, anything similar like that, fuck the fun parts. Like, no, they just don't even register.
There was like a lot of interfering where if you even wanted to go to like a night out, like using example, we were going out in London, in central London, James's Street, and even just telling them we're going to go out as a couple, it was like a big deal. It was like, okay, so what time are you going to go? What time are you going to come back? Who can, why are you going to go there alone, the pair of you as a couple? And you're like, as a married couple, you can't even go out.
Yeah, that was something that I found. So I do know like a bunch of like pretty traditional families, right? Yeah. I do, like, they're rife in our community. I'd even go so far as to say my parents fairly traditional. But that level, that was one thing that got me where I was like, like the most traditional family I know would not be that
traditional.
No, I wouldn't even say it's traditional. It's fucking mental. Like, you're being so nice and shit. Nah, fuck that family, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
it was just very much, it was controlling, coercive behavior as well. And what I found was with that, before we got married, they sold a product to me where, oh, we're so westernized. We won't mind if you kids went out. We don't mind what you guys do. As soon as we've got married, and it was like, again, in the first few weeks, let's go bowling together as a family. Let's go to see a film together. And you just think that's normal. It's fine. It's okay. You're doing a family thing. Then it came to the point where, oh, okay, we want to go out as a couple. What do you mean you want to go out as a couple, like the pair of you alone? Or if I was going out, again, I couldn't have any of my friends in my company, but I had to hang out with his friends.
Where do you think that came from? Like, what originated that? Because like I said, even culture, I can't see that being...
I saw it from my ex-father-in-law. He never allowed my ex-mother-in-law to go anywhere or do anything by herself. So there was either a trust issue from the beginning. Like I was working for M&S at the time, and I was a designer for the company with a supply base. So she worked on the shop floor for M&S, and she'd never been to a Christmas party. So I challenged that behavior whilst I was there. So I said, oh, you're going to go to your Christmas party this year, and I'm going to go to mine. And again, they had a wedding, their 30th wedding anniversary and her birthday. And for her birthday, I bought her a ticket to see Jagjit Singh live in concert with her friends. He then questioned me and said, how dare you book tickets for her to go out with her friends? And it was something she'd expressed to me that she's never done since she's been married, like hang out with a lot of her friends, because she's always done things with him. Which is, for me, it's healthy in a relationship to do things with your partner as well as do things with your friends. You know, because you have your own personality as well as you have the time together as a couple. It shouldn't be just about doing everything as a couple. And because I find that
overbearing.
Way overbearing, too much.
Yeah.
I
mean,
can't breathe.
No, I was reading the book.
Especially when you're living in a family unit, you can't breathe anyway.
I keep telling you, I was reading the book and it was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I had to put it down a couple of times just to return to normality. Like, it was just, it was absolutely like intense. But then going back to your childhood, I know we're time hopping a little bit here, but then you cover this in the book as well. Do you reckon your relationship or your mum's relationship with your dad had any bearing on your like experience, I guess?
See, I dated before that, but I never had a bad relationship in the sense where, and like they say, it's proven statistically, if you've seen domestic violence at home and abusive parents arguing, you are likely to be 68% chance of falling into one of those relationships, and it has nothing to do with what background the person's from.
Right.
Naturally, you're going to be one in 68% chance of falling into that trap. And I didn't know that until later on, obviously, after I've gone through everything. I've done my research, like researching through the book and speaking to qualified social workers. If I'd known that, I would have done things so differently, before even getting married or settling down. I would have looked into things and, just recognized some of the patterns and thought, how can I change them? How can I break away from those patterns? I would have done things differently. And as I didn't know, I had to learn the hard way to go through my own experience to then break away from that cycle of generational women before me that have gone through that hardship. It was that more than anything else. And also seeing dad and mum arguing constantly, I knew what kind of relationship I wasn't looking for, and I didn't want a relationship. Like I said, the reason for living with in-laws was, I wanted to have my children to have, both grandparents, because it meant so much to me that I lost out. So I made certain choices in life, and kind of partners I was looking for was because of things I'd lost out in my childhood. But I wouldn't say I've had a bad childhood, because I've had a fantastic childhood. Yeah,
and I think you do well to like highlight that in the book. Like you go over a couple of positive bits with your mum and like your relationship with your mum and how that developed. Obviously the closeness that you two had. Because it's just weird. Obviously, today we were saying this is the second domestic violence podcast like it's being covered, and I was googling stuff in prep for it, and there was something that basically said that children who go through stuff like this, where it's emotional abuse or domestic violence, they like suffer. In some cases, they suffer from PTSD, and it's like, that's the level it goes into. And it just makes you think. Just a little fun fact.
It does, and that's the thing. It's finding out like how far, what issues are you going through, and have they had any psychological impact on you, and how are you going to deal with them going forward? Because once I'd come out of that relationship, I made a choice that actually I'm going to work on me for a change. I'm going to learn to understand me better and understand that I need to fill myself up first with maybe knowledge, love, everything, and then I can go out there finding a relationship. And after that, I've got to say I've been lucky enough not to fall into a bad relationship. I've had relationships with people, and those men have contributed to my journey today. They've made me the person I am as well. And I'm very grateful to those guys that I've dated afterward. And, you know, they've brought the best out of me.
Yeah.
You know, and one in particular, the one relationship I was dating for 4.5 years, he was one of the guys that actually encouraged me to write the book, you know, and was there through the whole process of it. And that means a lot to me because, you know, as well as there's good guys and there's bad guys out there, we can't just tarnish them all with saying that they're all bad experience. But I wanted to break away from the silent generations of silent that the women before me, like my mum, my nanny, who'd silent their voices out. And again, I went through that stage for a couple of years where I silent my voice out. And I was like, the shame I've brought on my family. And, you know, everybody kept coming around doing of source, like someone had died in our house. And I was like, I need to shift this pattern from here to move on. And when you read the book, you can see, like, I've made it a bit of a comedy sketch.
Yeah.
You know, and to kind of keep it light because life is about having fun.
Yeah.
Do you know, it shouldn't be once you've gone through one bad experience, it defines you for the rest of your life. But if anything, gone through that one bad experience, let's educate a community through that process. Let's talk about the change. You know, let's see what we can bring about in dialogue, in policies and other things like that. Yeah. You know, it's really important to do. I mean, even when we're talking about domestic violence right now, there's a domestic violence bill being passed through House of Parliament as we're talking. And what's happening is the government is recognising that domestic violence, people that are going through it within the workforce should have leave to, you know, be able to deal with their situation and paid leave.
Yeah.
They never had any of that kind of services when my mum went through it. My mum had to hide it completely, couldn't get time off, again, the GP just kind of brushed her under the carpet, kept saying you've got depression because you're going through all this. It wasn't recognised as much as it is today. Mental health, domestic violence, all these issues are recognised today, but they weren't recognised in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, as much as we talk about the South Asian community, marital rape didn't become illegal until 91.
Yeah.
Which, that like blows your mind, which is like ridiculous.
People thought it's if you're married to that person,
it's their right.
It's their right, and your right as a wife to perform. So, you know, I found that really difficult. Like overall, if you look at some of the policies that have come in years later, and that's where it was really important for me when I started this journey. I started the book with the mindset of I want 1% change. It wasn't about the book. It was just about I want to change mindsets. That's what my end result was. I got far more than what I've bargained because now I've contributed to 2 policies, you know, in House of Parliament to change them. And it's so lovely to know that I've made those policies possible through this journey. And it started off with a book, you know, and being able to go to events where I can talk to, you know, the next generation, going from, you know, corporate businesses, talking to people from like LGBT community, diversity panel, forced marriages, honour-based abuse, all these things, you know, raising awareness and raising my voice in those platforms. It's given me an opportunity to, take on a lot and then share my experience with the people as well.
Yeah. Having like spoken to you like before actually coming on, it's clear that obviously you've been able to take such a negative experience and really turn that into a positive. What's the kind of work that you do now? Because I know that you're involved in like a plethora of like opportunities and panels and stuff. Like, what do you do now then?
So one of my main things I do is with the Sharan Project. It's a charity that supports women and vulnerable women. It's close to my heart because the founder, Polly Harrow, who started the charity off, do you know, back in the days when there used to be like that whole Punjabi saying, if some girl ran away from home or someone's done something, you know, the community would completely ostracize that girl off. And I found when I was talking to Polly, I related with her straight away, and I met her at your Saheli event about 3 years ago. And again, I didn't know this, but Hardip Singh Kohli had helped her to put a theatre play together with all the survivors. Yeah. So again, I was editing with Hardip at the time, and then I'd met her up one weekend at this event. I was editing on the Monday with Hardip, and I'd mentioned Polly to him, and he was like, you've got to work with this woman. She's amazing, what she's doing and her thought process with where she wants to get the Sharan Project. And it was that kind of connected us as well. So then I'd, you know, met her up later on, a couple of months later, and we just connected. Where when I'd got married and divorced and I'd left my in-laws home, I went to the local Gurdwara. And when I went to the local Gurdwara, I had a lot of the community there coming up to me, telling me that apparently I'd run away from home with all my wedding jewellery. And I was like, there's always a story behind a woman that leaves, you know, and nobody comes up to her to find out what her story is or take the time to listen. So that really got to me at the time, and it really upset me. And again, when Polly started her journey off with the Sharan Project, Sharan is the word to protect women, to give shelter. And, you know, there was women around her that she saw that didn't do anything wrong, but they got blamed for things. And if you throw a woman's honor into mud and she's like silk or have stains on it, but if you throw a man's honor that he's like gold into mud, you can wash it away.
Yeah.
So there's that whole difference between men and women as well, the way they're treated within the South Asian community, that whole gender thing. And yeah, guys can do what they want, can get divorced, can get remarried. But if a girl does it, you know, there's always a story behind, or someone's made up a story about her.
Yeah.
And it was that upset me and made me realize I'm going to stand up. I'm going to speak up to these communities, these behind the Gurdwara.
Yeah. I was about to say, your fucking former mother-in-law sounded like she was the president of the BBR, man. That's like, for anybody that doesn't know, right? The BBR basically like Punjabi CIA, right? If they spread a rumor about you, you're fucked. Like, that's it.
What did I call him in my book? It was something Judy, the general something. There is a
Yeah,
thing in one of the books. I can't remember it.
It was
right
something
now.
about the General Gurdwara Committee or something. It was something along those lines, wasn't it?
One
Yeah.
of those. And what I found was where that upset me the most. And then when I met Polly, and Polly told me why she's
Just to pause there, what's the craziest rumor you heard about yourself? So we obviously have the one about
I've run away from home,
yeah.
and I've taken all my wedding jewellery.
You were showing it to us before the podcast. It was great jewellery. It was for if anybody wants
really
anything, we'll link it to
Rajasthan
you.
style as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? Kundan jewellery.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And also, do you know what? How they're measuring up relationships with how much gold they're giving, and you know how big the weddings was as well. And we become like the Indian Joneses.
Yes.
The Indian version of the Joneses is like who can do the biggest wedding and who's going to have 800 to 1,000 guests. It was all these things that was really getting to me through the process of planning the wedding as well. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like that. And I really emphasized that in the book and talked about, you know, because a lot of people had approached me once I got talking about my own journey, that the hardship. And I knew one of my friend's parents took a loan out to get her married.
It's rife. It is rife, and my parents talk about it all the time, about how people take out loans, second mortgages, everything for one fucking day, where that BB that you fucking hate is going to be invited, no matter how good. Gordon Ramsay could be eating a pussy out, right? And she's still going to complain about the fucking food.
There's going to be someone still finding a fault at your wedding, because I remember there was a girl that walked up to me from my in-law side, and she went, "Your wedding was lovely, but it wasn't as big as mine." And I went, "But your wedding was just beautiful."
Bro,
I don't give a damn.
yeah, I'm totally with you. Like, I don't understand it. Like, it's like you could do everything for somebody, and
someone's going to find a fault. Someone's going to find. Like, one of my cousins had like the most lavish wedding. He had a 3-course sit-down meal, you know, with the whole, and it was out in the middle of nowhere. One of my cousins Nanne went, "Peanut किथे आ? प्याज peanut है नहीं गए. Glassy na peanut चाहिए." We were like, "Oh my god, you have to have one venue that has to break it down."
And if the wedding is too good, somebody will punch the groom in the face or something.
Yeah.
Like, you
there's
know,
always a fight.
Yeah.
There's always a fight, and there's always someone who's got to set up with that. Now they've started to hire security at weddings. I don't know if you know that.
Bro, so at uni, I used to work security, and I used to do weddings.
Oh,
I used to do weddings, and a lot of them were like, at the time, there were a lot of door checking. So none of these aunties would ever RSVP.
Yeah.
Like they think RSVPing and letting you know that they're going to turn up.
What number of guests are going to turn up? Yeah.
Like, what are they doing? Like, poor people. This is disgusting. Well, so what? I bring like my chacha from India. What do you want? And like, it was a lot of that. And I worked a couple of weddings. It was always fucking awful. They like try and pay you in food.
Yeah, and then it's like. Also, as well, the whole process with like, I originally wanted to have just an undercarriage, and I've always wanted an undercarriage marriage. I didn't want to have the whole hoo-ha and the party and everything. That was something I didn't want, because as being dyslexic, and I used to, as a child, really panic in big crowds. You put me in a room with 2,000 people and I'll work my way around the rooms and I'll leave a lasting impression with every single person. But if you put me up in front of 2,000 people to do a presentation, I mean, now I can do it. Back then I couldn't.
Yeah.
I was panicking with the guest list getting bigger and bigger, because I know every eye is going to be on me when I walk into the divan and when I walk into my wedding reception, and I don't want that. That was where I wasn't going to enjoy it, and I was going to get nervous and panic, and I was actually really nervous on the day. And I remember, you know, when should you smile as a bride? When should you not? When should you do a sexy pause? When should you not? All of those was going through your head. Should I show too much teeth or not?
Yeah.
You know, you had all of that going on as well. And then, you know, it was just the whole day was stressful. And then and I also remember, we've spent that much money on that wedding. Not one person came up to me and said, do you want a glass of water? Do you want anything? Other than my mum did in the morning. She got me jam toast at the Gurdwara. Bless her. She was the only person that was running around me. But all these guests came, 550 people. But nobody asked us if we've even eaten.
Yeah.
It was all about them more than us. And that's the sad part of it. Even to the one point where we were hugging guests in the reception. And I said to him, your family or mine? He goes, I don't know, just smile. That says it all.
Bro, every wedding's like that. My sister was the exact same. You ask my sister about the wedding, she'll be like, oh, I don't know. Like, they didn't even do a guest list. My sister had probably a handful of her friends there, if that, right? And then all of the other people, she was just like, we watched the wedding take back, and she's like, oh, is that the auntie from that place?
And is that the Bendu that we actually knew from like 10 years ago?
Yeah, whereas my parents were sat there like, look, we need to invite the Seetal Chacha bought me my first dog. This dog was bought from that person they came to the wedding, okay? That's very important.
And they helped us when we immigrated here.
Yeah. But weddings aren't like weddings are really for the parents, aren't they? Really. And I think that's probably something to change. But they'll still, if they spend a couple of £100,000 on your wedding, because of them, they will still remind you every fucking day.
Oh yeah. So I had like my nani ji, my mama ji, and two of my mama ji plus my mum, myself contribute to the wedding, and they kept demanding more in the sense where because this whole trend had just come out 10 years ago about having an engagement party. Let's do an engagement party. Let's do engagement party. Let's do a rukka. Let's do all these functions were just popping out. And I had never heard of these functions because when my sister got married, she had a very simple wedding as well. But she did have a big Indian wedding, but it wasn't as big as what mine was coming out to be. And it was really stressing me out. And I just wanted one day to be simple. I don't want to be this 5 functions and 20,000 outfits later.
Yeah.
I just want it to be about that one day. And then, the marriage afterward. But we ended up going from like everything like, to the gurmai and them even asking for sauna. Like asking for the jewelry and ringing up and saying, this is what we expect as gifts. I found that really cheeky.
It was the white gold bit as well, man.
Yeah.
Like,
he doesn't wear 24 karat gold because he's not a 24 karat gold son. He's white gold worth. Come on.
Yeah, I know. That's, oh my God. I've got to talk to you about this as well. Again, I feel like I'm dishing the secrets of the book. But what the fuck was it like being married to a baby, bro? Like, come on. There's people laughing here. No. Fuck you, all right? That was unreal.
I think that's an issue with overall, in our community overall, in the South Asian community. It's not just the Punjabi. I think it's the South Asian community. This is where mothers need to bring their sons up. Bring them up strong, bring them up with confidence, educate them and everything. But keep that separate where he doesn't leave his wife's bed at 2:00 in the morning to get into bed with his mother.
So I'm going to tell you.
Okay. Share the story from the book.
Yes, yeah. So no. Keep it real light because we want people to buy this fucking book. It's important to read, right? So that story, go on. Give us the cliff notes.
I just couldn't sing a Lodi.
God.
I couldn't sing a nursery rhyme to him, so we had to get up and leave our bedroom in the middle of the night to get into bed with his mum, so she could sing him a Lodi.
So when it came to that, so I read it. These guys hadn't read it yet, right? I messaged into our WhatsApp group, right? We've got one for the podcast, and I actually said to them, I was like, "Shit, I think this book's gonna end on a massive twist where this dude's having a sexual relationship with his mother," right? I thought somehow he wasn't going to be related.
I found it disturbing, sorry to say. I found it so disturbing when he's left our bed, shall I say, to get into bed with his mother. And he couldn't understand how I was confused that morning. And I was like, what grown guy in his 30s would leave his partner's bed to get into bed with his mum?
Oh my God.
I was quite disturbed, and I was disturbed for like days, but he seemed there was nothing wrong with it, and I was the one that wasn't being the understanding, caring wife.
Bro, I'm telling you, right, I thought I was 100% confident. I was like, shit, this is going to be some messed up twist in here, man. Like, he's going to be fucking his mom or something. Something's going to be fucked up here, right? But I agree. And speaking as somebody who's been, I wouldn't say babied, like we had jobs and shit when we were like 15. I think
mothers, especially where what's the other little thing I say in the book? Olipota syndrome. So where and I'll be honest, we're 3 sisters with a brother. And again, my mum has for her, it's been, oh my God, he's my son. And, my mum didn't get any recognition from my father's side of the family until he was born. So,
Right.
you know, she has, but then my brother lost that because he never really got my dad's love there. And, you know, my mum's always been conscious where, because we're a women's household, you know, that he hangs out with my cousins, he had the male roles around him. We'd go around calling him gay and picking on him as kids and stuff like that, you know, like, come on, we'll plait your hair, you can hang out with us girls and stuff. But she brought us up very different to a lot of other Punjabi households where, as a single parent, you had to run your home. And in probably a traditional home where you got a mum and dad, the father was playing a certain role and mother was playing a certain role. In our household, it was, I've got 4 kids, how are they going to help me to get the house chores done? So
Right.
things were shared between us.
Yeah.
So, you know, he'd hoover up, he'd even take the bins out, every single bin in the house out, including the bathroom bin with the menstrual cycle products in there, right? And at the end of the day, mum never made him think any different of things. So there were certain things my brother did that probably other guys didn't do at their household, or they did do as well. You know,
Yeah.
it depends on, I don't think it's got anything to do with, that's why I say it's got nothing to do with religion or even culture. It's how your family's brought up.
Yeah, it's your own familial values. Like if you actually make a concerted attempt to keep the sons and daughters the same,
Yeah.
but then also to, even
So
if
she
you don't,
brought us up equal.
Yes, there you go.
Whereas though, in his household, it was very much where he was a boy, he was a first boy, he was spoilt. Then he had a sister who never got notice or any credibility. And I noticed that very evidently when I got into that home. And I made sure, and I've got to say this, my sister-in-law was my rock in my relationship there.
Yeah.
And, you know, like we got on like
this
sisters.
is Gerline from the book.
Gerline from the book.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I got
she
ya.
was my little, and then obviously her husband, Loveneet as well. You know, them two were my rock. And, you know, we got on. There was never, and from day one of meeting her, I got on with her. But I also saw that they never gave like her credibility in that household. And, you know, they were trying to put her front for me and saying, oh, you know, and then it was pick and choosing as well between us girls, in the sense where when it suited them, she's married, she lives under her roof, and
Right.
her rules apply to her. But when it suited them, well, look at Gurleen, look at Gurleen. And it was like, well, you're picking and choosing. And also from speaking to her and knowing her, she told me that she never got any validation from them. And it was always him before her. And because he's the boy, you know, oh munda tu kuriyan veja kind of thing, and, you know, not giving her any credibility for things.
Yeah. I think you see that all the time in families and stuff. And that only Putta syndrome was the one. That was real fun. I know people like that. I know people who are like
But I just
15,
understand
16.
why parents do that, like mothers do that. Love your sons, but love them to the point where bring them up strong enough to give all the attributes to your kids that, you know, that's one thing my mum said to me when I got divorced. The day tu pera te, I'll say it in Punjabi, jehde din tu pera te khadi hona, us din sanu maan hona, ke, you know, you've made it. Even my mum Meji said that to me.
Yeah.
And today they're proud of me because I'm standing on my own 2 feet. I'm taking full responsibility of myself in every area of my life. And, you know, that's where you should bring both sex of your children, you know, may it be a girl or a boy, you should bring them up strong enough to have your values in them, but for them to know what values they're going to take forward and have their own identity.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be about them living in your shadow or
Yeah.
pleasing you. And that's what they don't seem to stop breastfeeding their children.
Oh,
sons.
fuck. Oh, you went dark.
Let go of that breast milk, will you?
It's fam, like, there's no breast milk, I swear, bro. I do all of my shit myself, right? I don't know. Yeah, I do get it, and I think that is a very important lesson.
And, you
from
know,
the
as
book.
sons as well, love your parents, love them with respect, that you give them respect between your life partner and your parents. There should be that fine line of like saying, you know what, I love you guys too, but at the same time, this is my life partner and I'm with her.
And the whole, like, I always think it's like, I wouldn't say it's like the fleeing of the nest, but like starting your own nest, I think is a very important aspect. And in your case, it just seemed like you were moving into like a pre-existing nest with all these like hatched children and shit
Yeah.
that were like hanging around. But there was never an urge to set up like your own household.
There was, before marriage, there was a conversation around it. And then
Right.
that's when obviously I fall pregnant. And then he used that to
Yeah.
his top ability to say, well, we had a 5-year plan of wanting to have kids, get a property, you know, develop as a couple, which most couples probably do, like they have a plan, maybe a 5-year, 2-year, 3-year, whatever. And we had a 5-year plan. And when I found out I was pregnant 2 months after marriage, and it was, considering we'd been sexually active before marriage, and this is a question my family threw to him and said, what if you'd got her pregnant before marriage? How would you have dealt with it then? Would you have asked her to have a termination then?
Yeah.
I never thought, and excuse my ignorance here, that once you're married, that you would have a termination within marriage. I never thought that ever. And I remember being at school having a conversation in religious education about abortion. And I remember saying to the teacher, I don't need to contribute to this because I'm never going to be in that situation. And not knowing years later, within my marriage, I will be pregnant.
Yeah.
And I'll be having my husband asking me to terminate my pregnancy.
Yeah, that was one of the, after everything in the story, that was one of the most harrowing bits in the whole book, I think.
Yeah.
And how that changed you and stuff. Well, look, emotionally, like looking back on it now, like what was going through your head at the time?
I wanted the baby, I'm going to be honest. As soon as I found out I was pregnant, I was nervous. Don't get me wrong. I mean, these Bollywood films or these romantic films you watch and they're like, I'm pregnant with a blue line. And everyone's like, oh my God, and they get excited. I didn't get any of that. If anything, I got first of all, when I saw I was pregnant myself in the bathroom, I panicked. I got scared. And there was a part of me was like, oh my God, shit, what am I going to do? How am I going to break this news? How are we going to, it's so early in our relationship. Do I want the baby? Even I went through that myself first. And once I'd calmed down, I thought, actually, I do want this.
Yeah.
You know, and once then I brought it up to him, and because I'd brought it up and it'd been just hours later, and there were so many emotions going through my head as well, and not knowing which way to go. And it was my birthday the day I find out I'm pregnant, and I'm like, right, we're going to go out for dinner again. That whole thing, living with the family. So we did the whole housework at the house with the family, and then going out for dinner. And I thought, great opportunity to tell him whilst we're alone at dinner. And as I do that, it didn't go the way it was meant to go. So we've gone into a gurdwara to do matha tekna, and I've gone. And I always said this to him, when I fall pregnant, I will always tell you in a gurdwara, and I'd come and sit next to you in the divan and tell you.
Yeah.
So as I got up from my side of the divan and I've walked across to his side and I sat next to him, and he turned to me and he goes, you're pregnant? And I went, yeah. And he just got up and walked.
And again, maybe this isn't the right question, right? Maybe this isn't the right question. But what the fuck, man? like normally, I understand it's like a shock or whatever, and but I don't understand being such a mummy's boy and a family's boy and shit. Like, how, in what world wouldn't the parents be like, oh, thank fuck?
Yeah.
Like, firstly, his dick works. Like, that's like a good thing, right? He's not firing blanks. And secondly, oh, excellent, they're pregnant, they're gonna stay together, kind of thing.
I think, you know what it is? Overall, people get married to start a family. And you're going to start a family. But the thing was, with that situation, because his parents, and I understood this later on when he expressed to me, his parents had him in the first year of marriage. And he felt like, and again, that's something I'd sensed, where I've spoken about earlier, where his parents had never done anything individually. They did everything together, and they lived for the kids. So I think for him, just for me, how I wanted to live with a family unit, for him it was like, I don't want to have that marriage my parents have had.
Yeah.
So it came from that. Right,
okay.
But to me, it wasn't about where you're coming from. I'm carrying life. I want to give birth to this life. And I'm pregnant. Now that I've been pregnant, it changes the whole of my 5-year plan. And my thought process has just completely changed overnight now. Yeah. And I want to go through with this pregnancy, but he didn't want to.
Right.
And you'll be surprised when you do look into the South Asian community overall. There's more abortions happening within marriages than outside of marriages.
Really?
Yeah. And when you get talking to the older generation, they've had abortion for immigration reason, for gender equality especially. We've had more gender equality abortions. And when I got talking, and once I opened up in my family, obviously my family, my mama, when you brought me home, and my mom, they sat me down and asked me in detail, tell us what happened, and I did. That's when I discovered how many people within my family unit and friends have had abortion within marriages.
Right.
Maybe the child was disability. There was a disability fear. There was immigration reasons, gender equality, and I was really shocked.
Jeez. I never knew it.
Yeah. So you'll be surprised once you get talking to people within the community how many people will come out under the woodworks. But yet these people go to the gurdwara. Yeah. They go and put this front up within the community, showing that they've got happy families, but nobody wants to talk about it. And this is a subject which is taboo in a lot of communities. Abortion is overall. I mean, even if you look at the UK, we put an abortion law in the 60s. We didn't revisit it until just 2 years ago. Yeah. And Canadian bought abortion law after us, and they've revisited it and remodified theirs. We're still living in an Elizabeth period until just 2 years ago. We've just, changed the legislation and, for the there's two processes you go through, which is a surgical and non-surgical.
Yeah.
The non-surgical, they've said that the woman can take the tablet in the comfort of her own home, the second procedure, which I went through. You know, and it's taken, 50 years to make a change to a bill.
Yeah. It boggles your mind. I think my solution to the whole South Asian pregnancy and marriage abortions thing, start handing out condoms on Broadway, man. You dirty married fucks, you need to start using protection.
The 12 pack.
Yeah, 12
Get the 12 pack.
Yeah.
Use them double. But it isn't
man.
even that. It isn't just even contraception, because like I had an issue where I was taking the pill and I was on contraception. I started taking medication. So I've never taken the pill before.
Yeah.
I started taking the pill and it cancelled out my medication. My
The
antibiotics
pill.
cancelled out my contraception.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just having that understanding, and it can be something as simple as that, you know, or you've had an accident with a condom. It can be a number of things. But
There's a lot of there's a lot of areas in our community, I think, the education's lacking, and sex, I guess, is one. Because like every time like you mention like sex education to like the older generation, they're like, oh, they're going to teach you how
they
to
don't
fuck.
want to talk about it.
Yeah.
They don't
But
even
it's
want to
like,
talk about it.
No, this is like an important aspect to learn, like in later on in life, and like all of these facets play such a big part in like a relationship and a healthy marriage and all that stuff. But before we end, I really want to talk about something. I mean, again, that you're working with at the moment was the Southall story.
Oh, okay. So
Are you able to share that? Wait.
yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I'm not working with it, but I've been following the case.
So if we just go back, what are the organisations? We'll link them in the description below. But what are the
Okay.
organisations that you work with?
So it's the Sharan Project I volunteer with. I'm a winner of Asian Women Award for Social Humanitarian. So I'm part of the Women of the Future Ambassadors Programme, which is part of Lloyd's Banking Group. And then I also there's a lot of corporate businesses where I've gone in and done a talk on their diversity and inclusion panels with schools, colleges as well.
Yeah.
So I've done stuff with the Home Office, West Midlands Police, Metropolitan. With that, I tend to go in and talk as a survivor from honour-based abuse, where you're training police force on how to deal with cases, CPSs as well in the room. So I think a lot of people just think it's just the book, but they don't realise there's more to me. And I probably don't put it all out there.
Let's put it out. Because I generally do think it is important that people understand that.
I wanted change,
yeah.
and that change for me was great, and I realised it's in my voice, and it's the work I do. So I do write a lot of pieces that I'm passionate about. You know, if I'm doing anything to do with the writing side, I have to be strong about. I've got to feel strong about it, and it's got to be something that's close to my heart, that I want to make a shift and change. So with doing all the charity stuff, there's a case called the Southall's case, which the Southall Black Sisters have been lobbying in House of Parliament. A lot of Punjabi community don't even know about the Southall's case. They reached out to the Gurdwara for support. And again, a lot of community don't want to support the case because it's seen as honour-based abuse. Again, I found that when I was kind of launching my book. When I reached out to the Punjabi community, people were just closing the doors on me. And it took Hardeep Singh Kundal from Ernst & Young, when she used to work there at the time. And she read my work, connected with it on a personal level, came back to me and said, right, I'm going to launch you through EY Sikh Network. Once I got launched through EY Sikh Network, that's when I had all those people that rejected me come forward and were like, oh, Benji, we want to work with you now. And all of a sudden I've become from Kalbir to a Benji overnight. And they're like, you know, even if you want to use our music, you can. All the emails I got, before that, nobody wanted to work with me because they thought, A, it's not going to get anywhere. B, is it a subject people want to talk about? You know, unless you put it out there, you don't know.
Yeah.
You've got to believe in yourself more than anyone else does. And I, be honest with you, not being arrogant or anything, but I always thought, I want change and I'm going to come about it and I'm not going to give up on this project until it gets somewhere.
Yeah.
And lucky enough, I had Anne Robinson's BBC crew approached me to do the Abortion on Trial documentary. That came out 2 weeks before my book got launched. The book got launched on the 1st of November 2017. Then 5 days later, I was doing a TED Talk on honour-based abuse.
Yeah.
So having all three of those things in a matter of space of 6 weeks, it kind of had that energy and that, you know, on social media, everybody was like saying, well, what's going on here? What's this book about? And then all of a sudden people are picking up the book, you know, and then obviously the charity, the work I do with them, a bit more noise around that. And then also you had, you know, other honour-based cases that have happened. Like you've got, there's so many cases, because when I did my book launch, I had Polly Harrow, who's the founder of the Sharan Project, Mandy Sangera, who's a human rights lawyer. I had Caroline Goody, who carried the biggest honour-based case, but she couldn't make it because of like another case had come up that evening, so she had to cancel on me. I had Pretty Girl, who was the local Sikh MP in Quinton in Birmingham, but she couldn't make it because she got held up in House of Parliament as well. Then I had Jerry Campbell, who's a senior police officer who'd carried out honour-based cases for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And him sitting in the room when he turned around and went back from the 60s up to date with all the honour-based cases, a lot of people were shaking their heads and they couldn't believe how many of those cases were Sikh cases. And Seethal's case was one of those cases, but nobody in the room knew who Seethal was.
Yeah.
So she was a girl from 2014 whose husband, she married a guy from India, British-born girl, and she's had 4 kids with him, 2 girls and 2 boys. And his younger brother couldn't have kids. So he said, well, can my brother adopt one of each of our kids, especially a boy? Because you know what it is with a boy because of carrying the surname and all of that, and favouring boys over girls. She said no. And basically on the terms that the education system out there to here is so different. And he's an MP's son out there in India. So what he did was, behind her back, and he'd been abusing her for 3 years prior to that, and she'd gone home and saying to her family, he hits me and this and that, like that whole mentality, come on, get on with it kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, don't worry about it, things will get better. So she kept going back and forwards to her parents, and they just kept dismissing her. They decided to go to India, and he did a holiday to India where he sold his property, his car. He'd actually given his notice in at work, and they were going for Vaisakhi. He took her out there. First night, had the conversation about the kids and if they can, you know, allow the second son to be adopted by his brother. And his brother-in-law, as in his brother, sister-in-law, and him, the 3 of them killed her. Murdered her out there, and the elder 2 kids had seen the uncle, auntie, and the father strangle the mother to death in the room. The kids currently at this moment are in India. They've not been back in the UK since 2014.
Man.
And not many people know about this case. And again, what upsets me about this is where you've got a woman who's been murdered in India, and none of the Punjabi community know about this case. But yet we've got Free Juggy case, we've got Bapu Sarup Singh's case, you know, human rights cases. But yet we've got Punjabis lobbying outside of House of Parliament, which is great, don't get me wrong, it's fantastic. But then why is there a gender difference of, because it's honour-based abuse and the shutdown with the honour-based abuse is greater and they don't want to pick up these cases?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think there's a discrepancy just in gender in general when it comes to our community, where it's like that case there, for example, the kids are still out in India.
Yeah.
And like, unless somebody does something about it, there's nothing. Is there like a petition or anything going on?
Well,
we'll link it again in the
Southall
description.
Black Sisters have actually, that's where like 2015 in House of Parliament, they've had a conversation, they had the family there to talk about it and go into detail, and that's why I know so much detail. They've like protested, they've put the letters forward to Theresa May to speak to the government out there. Nothing's been done about it.
Yeah.
You know, and again, they've lobbied places, and hats off to Southall Black Sisters here because they have picked up that case. Again, the biggest case where they got recognised was for Kiranjit Agrawal, with the, you know, a lot of people would know that case as the film or the book Provoke. And, you know, it took, again, someone to raise awareness about some survivor who was just going to be, you know, forgotten and also jailed for something that she did. She, you know, burnt her husband alive because he was beating her.
Yeah.
And all these cases that we keep dismissing and we don't want to talk about it because there's shame in that, you know, and the shame within our community.
Yeah.
That could have been me. I could have been one of those girls if I didn't pick the phone up to my family that night. You know, the door locks changed on me. I could have been one of those girls, and that's where I made a choice to raise my voice to the community, to them, to family and everyone, because I wanted that shift and change, and we need to raise awareness around it, but raise it in a way where you can be intelligent and, you know, talk about it in safe spaces. Like your podcast right now is a safe space to talk about it and people can listen to it, because there's people out there that don't want to come out and talk about it in public because they feel like, our family going to think differently of them? You know, are they strong enough to raise their voice? There's so many elements when you look into it.
Yeah, that aspect of, and you cover it greatly in your book, that aspect of like communal shame. Yeah. Like, oh, we've got to honour, we can't like let anybody, like we need to portray this veneer that, oh, everything in our life is perfect. We would never do something like this. Like, look how respectful we are. Look how this is. But in reality, you scratch a little bit beneath that surface. Everybody has some problems, and unless you confront those and actively try and fix those as a family, as a community, or however you want to see it, you won't get anywhere. Like imagining like people were putting as much effort into. Imagine people were putting as much effort into these cases of honor-based abuse as they are into their own weddings.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like hundreds of thousands of pounds one family will spend. Well, you know, a tenth of that would make a massive difference in a case like that.
Well, what disappoints me is here, as a godbrother, we're happy to take the money off the couple and their families to get them and married in an undergarage. We've already now just started to describe, you know, and go into detail about what an undergarage means.
Yeah.
And making sure the couple understand what vows they're taking. But whereas though, you know, when something like this is happening to your daughters, what are you doing about it? And there's one thing I can say here, sitting here. There's the MP, Pretty Gill. Her dad had a charity, which he did from the Smethwick High Street Gurdwara in Smethwick. And he, from a very young age, where how Pretty got into this was where he used to support women. But again, I've lived in Birmingham all my life in Smethwick. I didn't even know that facility was there until I spoke to her about it. And, you know, there were things like that out there, but it was, again, so hidden that only certain people knew in the community, because the sharm around it, that we can't put it out there that our Godwara is doing this seva for the women in the community.
Yeah.
Because what are Loki going to think of us?
Yeah, and it's.
But if you look at just Guru Nanak Dev Ji, teaching.
Yeah, go on.
You know, he's given dowry, he stood against. Sati, he stood against. Gender equality. You know, our gurus have led by examples. So why are we not having those services within our Godwara?
Totally agree. Like 100%, I agree. How do Gurdwara justify like having investments rather than opening up charities? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense. But then I guess you can make it even more granular. We as just individual people, I think we can do a lot. Like, it could have been very easy for you to have gone through a situation like you did, clam up about it, or even have that woe is me attitude.
Yeah.
Whereas like, oh no, like, oh, I've got to like take a break, or I'm just going to break away from it. Whereas you actually actively are doing something to confront it, I think is a super commendable thing.
Thank you.
Excellent. I feel like we've hit our time there, haven't we?
No, yeah.
I reckon we can 100%. Like, I would love to have you on back again, because there's a plethora of shit that we could talk about.
Yes.
I didn't even get into dating apps with you. Like, come on.
We can.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's another one.
What was it like? So how old were you when you?
Do you know what? It's so funny because I met with a friend this week, and I'm not on Tinder or anything like that. And she was like,
"All right, get rid of the shame out of your voice, right?"
No, she said to me, she goes, "Come on, get on Tinder." Because I goes, "How did you meet your partner?" And she was on Tinder. And I went, "Oh my god." But it was the Asian date. It was that whole, it wasn't, Asian date wasn't big at the time, because we're talking 10 years ago. It was the Gurdwara list.
Oh, okay.
And the Gurdwara list. And it was that Southall Gurdwara and Havelock Gurdwara had a list. And apparently Harrow did. I didn't do the Harrow one. I did the Southall Gurdwara one. And then it was, back then it used to be, I don't know if you guys remember, now I'm going to show my age, High Five or something. It was a bit like Facebook, but it was smaller. So it was that. Okay. And then obviously the local auntie. And then there were like dating things you can go to. Whereas now there's like Tinder, there's loads of other things. So when I did the book, I did
Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, Grindr.
I haven't actually gone on them. And do you know what? I had a friend say to me this week, come on, you got to get on it and get out there. I'll give it a go.
Bro, I'm telling you, Tinder would fuck your life up. Probably for the worse, I won't lie. But in the short term, it would be good. Like,
how many people really look for serious relationships on there? I doubt it.
I don't know. It kind of depends. My last serious relationship was off Tinder.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends on what you're like as people. Yeah. Oh, no. Don't even say same, and then don't expect me to tell you that.
See, without sounding arrogant.
So I'll tell you the way that they met, right?
Okay.
And this is like gossipy as fuck, but fuck it. So Japs comes across Mona's dating profile.
Okay.
On Tinder.
And was it a good written one? Like, so I'm sorry, I have to have it properly written out, otherwise forget it.
I'm with you on that. What was his profile like?
He's got to have spent time.
So this is the thing. He came across mine.
Right.
Obviously, I spent time on mine. I made sure it was absolute perfection.
That's what I mean.
I didn't swipe right on him.
So she didn't swipe right.
I don't seeing him.
So Jasper did not make any impression whatsoever. But what he did was he went onto LinkedIn from Tinder,
For God's sake, he didn't
to
do it.
find this specific woman
Right.
on LinkedIn because
That's
she had
effort.
That's effort and kind of fucking weird, right? So he DMs her, he gets her full name, gets her on Instagram,
Right.
DMs her, and for some reason this woman decides to respond.
So he DMs me.
Right.
I don't
But there's nothing wrong with responding to that. Go on, carry on.
Bro,
Sakai.
come on.
Well, the thing is, he DMs me. I don't see the DM for some reason because we're not friends. He follows me. He likes then all my photos. And
Smart
then
guy.
I see that he's DM'd me, and I'm like, wow.
And now this guy's a freak, right?
You would actually think that, wouldn't you? Because when someone's liked all your pictures, you're like, you freak, you weirdo. There's one thing about dropping someone a message, and there's another thing about liking every single picture. Come on.
I'm totally with you, right? You could drop somebody a message, but once you've gone through Tinder, LinkedIn, and then to Instagram,
Don't get me. Okay, I'm gonna.
and
be
they've been
honest.
together for 2 years now.
Well
So
done, well done. See, whereas though I'm not gonna lie, like recently I have a crush on this some guy, and I've actually messaged him, and I did notice him watching my Insta stories and stuff like that. But
and now you're on his podcast. Thank you.
was it meant to be? But I didn't like any of his pictures, but I did go through his page, and then I made a point of like, because there's one thing that was quite funny with like. A conversation we'd had, so I went, oh my god, this reminds me of when you'd corrected me when I was like saying something. So I left a comment and I went, yes, I am going through your Instagram page.
I like
I'm
the
confident
confidence.
about that. I was like,
That's
it's okay. But I've been meeting people because I do a lot of events and I'm always out and about. I don't know why, but I apparently catch people's attention in different places.
it.
Airports. I've had a guy ask me out in an airport, on a plane, on a flight. I've had like on a train. So I don't need the apps. I was sort of telling my friend this week, I don't need the apps. And then when I'm doing events, the people are like, I'm just a chatty person. I'm quite a bubbly person, so I just tend to drawing all that energy and not being arrogant, guys. But
Interesting.
yeah.
I like it.
the
I like the energy. All right, we're gonna wrap it up there. Generally, a pleasure to have you
You
on.
too.
We're gonna
Thank
continue this
you.
offline. But yeah, Kalbir Bains.
Thanks for having me, guys.